across this country, police officers do amazing work. But they also oftentimes forget that that takes a toll on what they do because they're seeing horrendous crimes.
Take a police officer's typical day. It can start with something as simple as a traffic ticket in the morning. It can go to an assault in the afternoon, to this guy sitting over in the corner, a young male that has just sexually assaulted a 10-year-old girl. And he's got this, now I'm the chaplain, I'm not supposed to talk like this, but he's got this shit-eating grin on his face because he knows you can't do anything about it. And then the officer goes home to spouse and children, and they're supposed to turn that off. Hi, honey, I'm home.
The trauma that happens from dealing with some of these events is going to affect your personal life, and you have to deal with it, or it can destroy you.
I, unfortunately, learned the hard way. I won't stand here or anywhere else and say I was so ignorant I didn't realize that suicide in law enforcement was a problem. I knew it as a chief. I just did not make it a priority. So 2 suicides in 5 months made it my priority.
2 party shot inside of 34 Drive.
Well, now we're rolling again.
The chief called me early in the morning on Halloween, October 31st, 2010, and told me that Eric had shot and killed himself at his house. We spend so much time mentally preparing for encounters with, armed gunmen, and if we stop this car and someone jumps out and Eric and I, have to deal with this threat, how am I going to respond to that? I'm going to do this, and I think about those things all the time, and I think most police officers do. And Eric, killed himself, and it was something that I had never thought about even being a possibility, and that's why it was so shocking.
Of course, it's shocking. Suicide is a possibility that cries out for law enforcement to make mental health a priority, and that means confronting the tough guy culture.
So the biggest barrier is the culture, I can't talk about it, I need to be tough.
It's one thing to be strong and courageous out in the field, but when you come back to the station, it's okay to hurt. It's okay to talk about those hurts. It's when we internalize that we find ourselves in a lot of trouble.
I grew up in a law enforcement family. My dad's a retired policeman, my grandfather. I grew up in that culture where men handle their own problems, men don't cry, and you just tough it out.
When Sprague was in uniform, he'd killed a suspect who was stabbing his partner. After several years as a homicide detective, he started having nightmares.
And I decided that it would be easier to self-medicate and use alcohol, because that's what I'd seen my dad do during tough times, and so it kind of started off from there, and it just progressively got worse, the drinking.
So much worse that he tried to kill himself. His ex-wife found him and got him to the hospital.
Here comes Chief Whitman, Chief of Police, and John Lamb, the deputy chief. And they were both in jeans and they were both in t-shirts. And the first thing they did was each one walked up to me and put their arms around me and gave me a hug and said, "Hey, it's going to be all right. You're part of our family. We're going to get you through this." If I'm really stressed about something, I talk to somebody about it. And it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of someone that recognizes there's a problem and deals with it, instead of just, I'll deal with that later. You know what I mean?
I think it depends on where you want to spend your dollars. I think mental health and suicide prevention awareness is pay now or pay later. There's a huge cost if you're having officers burn out, if you're having officers die by suicide or attempt suicide or have anger management issues because the stress and trauma is overwhelming them. So a department's going to deal with this stuff eventually. I think from a lot of times, unfortunately, we have to talk about numbers. I think it makes sense to make mental health awareness and prevention a huge priority and pay for that up front and avoid problems and keep officers safe, keep citizens safe, as opposed to dealing with the aftermath.
The biggest responsibility falls on the administrators, I think on us, to show by our actions that it's okay to tell us somebody needs help because we're going to get them the help, or for somebody to come out themselves and ask for help. Our goal is not to fire people, it's not to get people in trouble, it's to keep them as productive members of this police department. And a lot of times that means sending them to psychological services, connecting them with a peer support officer or a chaplain.
You can get better, you can recover, and you can lead a normal life. So I'm happy to say I've worked with many officers who've been able to make full recovery. Doesn't even encapsulate it, because I think many of them recover beyond where they were initially. They're healthier and happier than when they started.
I've utilized my share of psychological services throughout my career. I have gone to them just for personal matters. I've gone to them for professional matters. I think that everybody has something that really impacts them.
Often what I find myself doing most often is just listening, being quiet and letting them tell me what's going on with them. As one of the biggest mistakes we do as men and as cops in general is that we want to give people answers. Here's your problem, here's your solution. To be effective in peer support, you can't do that. You have to really listen and let them find the answer themselves.
You know what creates trust with a police officer and a police chaplain is we ride around in that car. That's his office. And in that office, we talk about what he wants to talk about. We're there to get to know each other so that when that officer, when a wound is coming up, when something is happening with the officer or someone in his family, that he feels safe in coming somewhere to talk.
I had a chief tell me once that he doesn't care why officers are using peer support or why they're using psychological services or why they're talking to a chaplain's unit. He doesn't care why. He just wants to know they are. So he wanted to create an environment where people felt it was okay to go do those things.
So officers need to know what's available. They start learning about mental health and suicide prevention in the academy and keep learning throughout their careers. And resources need to have high visibility.
One of the best practices that we're using are we have 3 officers who have all had some type of incident in their life, a significant incident. They have come forward. They are telling their story. They're telling their story to every one of our officers in our department.
I had been in the military previously before I was a police officer. And I think just overall the effect of everything that was going on in my life kind of caught up with me. And it took someone outside of my group, it was like a bridge from peer support to me, a conduit of someone that was outside of my group telling me, hey, you're messing up. I think this video that we did through the peer support and in-service has done leaps and bounds for our department. I have had guys that have 25 years on that I thought were just these strong head, didn't want to change things, came up to me and thanked me for what I did. And I think that right there shows me that what we're doing is right.
You provide resources as a chief executive of any organization. You provide resources for your people to be successful. You provide training that is designed to protect them and make them safe on the street. You need to do the same kind of effort and the same kind of dedication when it comes to a thing that's far more likely to damage your people than anything else, which is teaching them how to deal with their own stresses and their own mental health, and give them the tools and resources they need so that they can be productive and effective for the community they serve.
These are suicide risk factors and warning signs to watch for. talking about death or dying or suicide, increased alcohol and drug use, feeling trapped, hopelessness, anger, chronic anger, irritability, outbursts, violence and aggression, relationship problems, isolation, recklessness, mood changes. Here are some resources that you might find useful in building and strengthening your department's mental health and suicide prevention training.